It's a cold, quiet night in January 1974. The streets of Seattle are hushed, blanketed in that eerie stillness that makes your skin crawl for no reason at all. Somewhere in a dimly lit basement apartment, an 18-year-old college girl named Karen Sparks is fast asleep, dreaming of exams or boys or whatever fills the mind of a carefree student. She doesn't hear the faint creak of her window sliding open. She doesn't feel the presence of someone, something, slipping into her room like a shadow with a heartbeat. And then, out of nowhere, the air explodes with violence. A metal rod, ripped right from her own bed frame, crashes down on her skull. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound is sickening, a wet crunch that echoes in the empty space. Blood sprays across the sheets, pooling under a shattered head. She doesn't even have time to scream before he's on her, pinning her broken body to the mattress. He doesn't stop there. Oh no, this isn't just murder. It's a twisted ritual. He takes that same blood-soaked rod and forces it into her, violating her in ways that make your stomach churn just thinking about it. When he's done, he leaves her there, barely alive, a crumpled heap of flesh and bone, slipping into a coma that'll trap her for days. She survives. Barely, but the girl she was? That's gone forever, replaced by a shell with permanent brain damage, a living ghost of his first confirmed strike. That night wasn't just a crime. It was the opening act of a reign of terror that had stretched across years and states, leaving behind a trail of bodies, some found, some lost forever, and a nation gripped by fear. This wasn't random chaos. This was calculated, methodical, and so brutally personal, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. The man behind it? Theodore Robert Bundy. Ted, a name that had soon become synonymous with pure, unadulterated evil. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we peel back the layers of this monster, let's walk the blood-soaked path he carved, one gut-wrenching murder at a time. Ted Bundy didn't just kill. He hunted. He toyed with his prey like a cat with a half-dead mouse, savoring every second of their terror. His methods were as horrifying as they were cunning, and the scenes he left behind? They're the stuff of nightmares that stick with you long after the lights go out. Take Lynda Ann Healy, a 21-year-old University of Washington student, snatched from her basement room on February 1st, 1974. Picture it. She's asleep, cozy under her blankets. When Ted creeps in, he doesn't waste time. A blunt object, maybe a crowbar, maybe something he grabbed on a whim, smashes into her head. Blood gushes, soaking her pillow as she goes limp. But here's where it gets really messed up. He doesn't just leave her there. He dresses her up like a twisted doll, wrapping her in her own nightgown, and carries her out into the night. Later, he confesses to driving her to a secluded spot, raping her lifeless body, and then dumping her somewhere she wouldn't be found for over a year. Her skull turns up on Taylor Mountain, alongside others, a grim trophy of his growing collection. Then there's a Lake Sammamish nightmare, July 14th, 1974. It's a sunny day, the kind where people flock to the park, laughing and carefree. Janice and Ott, 23, and Denise Nassau, 19, are just 2 faces in the crowd. Ted strolls up, charming as hell, his arm in a fake sling, playing the helpless guy who needs a hand with his boat. They fall for it, who wouldn't, and follow him to his tan Volkswagen Beetle. What happens next is pure horror. He knocks them out cold, one after the other, with a crowbar to the skull. Handcuffs snap onto their wrists, and he drives them deep into the woods. There, he rapes them, strangles them with his bare hands, and leaves their naked bodies to rot. Witnesses saw him that day, calling himself Ted. But by the time anyone put together, those girls were long gone, their remains scattered like discarded toys. Fast forward to January 15th, 1978, Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority house. This is Ted at his most unhinged. He's on the run, a fugitive with nothing left to lose, and he's hungry for blood. It's 3 a.m., and the house is silent. The girl's asleep after a night of college life. He slips in through a back door with a busted lock, a piece of firewood clutched in his hand. First up is Margaret Bowman, 21. He beats her skull in, the wood splintering with each blow, blood and brain matter splattering the walls. He wraps a stocking around her neck and pulls tight, her body jerking as life drains out. Next, Lisa Levy, 20. He clubs her senseless, then shoves a bottle inside her, tearing her apart. He bites her hard, leaving deep jag marks on her buttocks and breasts, a grotesque signature. Two other girls, Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, get bludgeoned too, their jaws shattered, teeth knocked out, but they survive barely. He's out the door in 20 minutes, leaving a massacre behind, and he's not done. Blocks away, he breaks into another student's place and beats Cheryl Thomas within an inch of her life before vanishing into the night. And then there's Kimberly Leach, just 12 years old, his youngest known victim. February 9th, 1978, Lake City, Florida. She's at school, innocent and unaware, when Ted lures her away, maybe with a sob story, maybe pretending to be a cop. He takes her to a hog shed, rapes her, slits her throat, and dumps her tiny body under the rotting wood. It's his last kill, and it's so senseless, so brutal. It's almost too much to process. These are just snapshots. There are dozens more. Bodies strangled, skulls bashed in, some decapitated and kept as souvenirs. He'd revisit them, grooming their corpses, having sex with them until they were too decomposed to touch. This wasn't just murder. This was a sick, twisted dance with death, and Ted was a maestro. Now, let's rewind and meet the man behind the mask. Ted Bundy wasn't some hulking, wild-eyed lunatic you'd spot a mile away. No, he was a guy next door, handsome, charming, articulate. The kind of dude you'd trust to walk you home. And that's what made him so damn terrifying. Born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24th, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, Ted's life started messy. His mom, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was 22, unmarried, and pregnant in a time when that was a scandal. She gave birth at a home for unwed mothers, and the father? Nobody knows. Some say it was a sailor. Others whisper it might have been her own dad, Samuel Cowell, in a twisted family secret. Either way, Ted grew up thinking Louise was his sister, and his grandparents were his parents, a lie that messed with his head when he finally learned the truth. They moved to Tacoma, Washington, when he was 4. Louise married Johnny Bundy, a cook who adopted Ted and gave him his last name. Johnny and Louise had 4 more kids, and from the outside, it looked like a normal family. But dig deeper, and it's a different story. Ted later claimed his grandpa Samuel was a violent, abusive tyrant, beating his wife, torturing animals, and maybe even worse. Was it true? Hard to say. Ted was a liar when it suited him, but it paints a picture of a kid surrounded by darkness early on. As a teen, he was shy, awkward, but smart. He'd wander the streets at night, peeking through windows, stealing stuff, feeding a growing obsession with control and power. By high school, he started shaping that polished exterior, good grades, Boy Scouts, a paper route. He went to University of Puget Sound, then transferred to the University of Washington, studying psychology. He graduated in 1972, worked at a suicide hotline, and even dipped into politics, charming his way into Republican circles. He dated women, Diane Edwards, Liz Klopfer, building this perfect little life. But underneath, something was rotting. So what flipped the switch? Why'd this clean-cut law student turn into a killing machine? Psychologists have been chewing on that for decades, and it's still a puzzle with missing pieces. Some point to his childhood, the shame of being a bastard kid, the lies about his mom, the alleged abuse from his grandpa. Maybe it planted seeds of rage and resentment. Others say it was rejection. Diane Edwards dumped him in the late 60s, and he never got over it. A lot of his victims looked like her. Young, pretty, long, dark hair parted in the middle. Coincidence? Doubt it. Then there's the psych stuff. Experts like Hervey Cleckley, the father of psychopathy, slapped that label on him during his Florida trials. Psychopaths are cold, manipulative, zero remorse, check, check, check. Ted could lie like breathing, charm anyone, and feel nothing while he crushed a girl's skull. But it wasn't just that. He had necrophilia, sex with corpses, paraphilia, sadism. This guy got off on pain, power, and death itself. Thomas Whittaker, a psychology prof, said Ted was emotionally stable on the surface, wearing a mask of sanity that hid the monster underneath. Stable, my ass. Stable people don't keep severed heads in their apartment. He blamed everything but himself, porn, alcohol, society, even his victims, saying they radiated vulnerability and basically asked for it. Bullshit. This was a guy who knew exactly what he was doing and loved every second of it. And Rule, who worked with him at the hotline and wrote The Stranger Beside Me, called him a sadistic sociopath who thrived on control, even after death. He once told her he was the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet. Truer words were never spoken. Let's break down how he did it, step by step, because this is where it gets really twisted. Ted had two main playbooks, and he mixed them up depending on the mood. He'd spot a girl, usually young college-age brunette, and turn on the charm. Picture him. 10 slacks, a button-up shirt, that disarming smile. He'd fake an injury, arm in a sling, crutches, asking for help with books or his car. Hey, could you give me a hand? I'm kind of stuck here. Who's going to say no to that? Once she's close, bam, crowbar to the head, lights out. He'd cuff her, toss her in his Beetle, and drive off to some remote spot. That's where the real horror started. Rape, strangulation, sometimes decapitation. He'd keep the bodies, revisit them, dress them up, screw them until they fell apart. Sick doesn't even cover it. Other times, he didn't bother with the act. He'd break in, middle of the night, dead quiet, catching them asleep. Karen Sparks, Lynda Healy, the Chi Omega girls, they never saw it coming. A blunt weapon to head, maybe a log or a tire iron, then strangulation or worse. He'd take his time, savoring the chaos, leaving behind scenes that'd haunt cops for years. He was smart about it. Too smart. No fingerprints, no loud guns, just quiet, brutal efficiency. He'd scout his targets, learn their routines, strike when they were alone. And the victim choice? Some say it was random, but that dying look-alike thing sticks out. He had a type, and he hunted them like a predator stalking prey. Let's map this out, year by year, murder by murder, because the sheer scope of it is mind-blowing. 1974. The Northwest bloodbath, it kicks off with Karen Sparks in January, then Lynda Healy in February. Spring and summer. He's a machine, Donna Gail Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball, Georgianne Hawkins, all vanished from Washington and Oregon. Lake Sammamish in July is his boldest move yet. By fall, he's in Utah at law school, and the killings follow. Nancy Wilcox, Melissa Smith, Laura Am. Bodies turn up battered, raped, dumped in the wild. 1975. Caught, but not stopped August 16th. He's nabbed in Utah for a traffic stop. Cops find handcuffs, a ski mask, rope in his car. He's linked to Carol Duranche's kidnapping. Convicted in 76. Gets 1 to 15 years. But he's slippery. Charged with Karen Campbell's murder in Colorado. He escapes twice. First from a courthouse library in June 77, caught in days. Then December 30th, he saws through his cell ceiling and bolts. 1978, Florida's final rampage, he lands in Tallahassee, free and feral. January 15th, the Chi Omega slaughter. February 9th, Kimberly Leach. He's reckless now, leaving witnesses, bite marks, fibers. February 15th, a cop nabs him in a stolen car. Game over, or so they think. Ted's trials were a circus. First up, Miami, 1979, for the Chi Omega murders. He's his own lawyer, arrogant as hell, grilling witnesses, smirking for the cameras. Bite marks on Lisa Levy's body and a sorority sister's testimony nail him. Guilty. Death penalty. Then Lake City, 1980, for Kimberly Leach. Same deal. Overwhelming evidence. Another death sentence. He marries Carol Boone in court, has a kid with her in 82. Fans send him love letters. It's surreal. By 1989, he's confessing 30 murders, maybe more, spilling details to stall the inevitable. January 24th, Florida State Prison, 7 a.m. They strap him into Old Sparky, the electric chair. Crowds cheer outside as 2,000 votes fry him. He's gone, but the scars he left, those don't fade. So why'd he do it? Power, control, a hunger that never quit. Some guess 36 victims. Others say 100 plus. will never know the full toll. His mind was a black hole, charming 1 minute, soulless the next. He didn't just kill, he consumed lives piece by piece and smiled while doing it. This isn't just a story to tell, it's a warning. Ted Bundy wasn't a boogeyman hiding in the dark. He was a guy you'd invite in, never suspecting the monster behind the mask. And that, my friend, is the scariest damn thing of all.